She won the match, then sat down and said nothing. What her opponent whispered at the net changed everything. A 21-year-old girl just walked off the biggest court of her life, and instead of celebrating, she sat down on her bench, stared at 12,000 screaming fans, and said absolutely nothing. No fist pump, no smile, nothing. And 40 minutes later, in a quiet press room, she finally told reporters the 7 words her opponent whispered in her ear that broke her open. Stay until the end, because what happened after that whisper is something almost nobody has connected together yet, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it either. Before we get to those 7 words, I need you to understand something. This is not just a tennis story. This is a story about what happens when a person holds something enormous inside themselves for 2 straight weeks, refuses to let it out because letting it out would cost them everything, and then one sentence from a total stranger cracks the whole thing open in front of a live crowd. If you have ever carried something like that yourself, this next 15 minutes is going to hit differently. And if you want to see where this story goes next, because trust me, what happens on the very next match day matters, hit subscribe now. Not because I am asking for a favor, because if this story means anything to you the way it means something to me, you are going to want to be here when the next chapter drops. Now let's go back. Let's go back to where this really started, because none of what happened at that net makes sense unless you understand exactly what this girl had already survived. Her name is Eala. She is 21 years old, a lefty from the Philippines who left home as a young teenager to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, thousands of miles from everything familiar. For most of her life, she was a name tennis insiders knew and casual fans did not. That changed in the span of about 10 days, and it changed so fast that even the sport itself seemed unprepared for it. Here is the wall she was standing in front of. In the entire history of professional tennis, no woman from the Philippines had ever won a WTA Tour-level title. Not one. Ever. That was the wall when Eala walked into the final of the Washington Open against Jessica Pegula, the world number 3, playing on American soil in the American capital. Eala dropped the first set. Then she won the second. Then, in the third set, she did something nobody expected. She bageled a top 3 player in a final, 6-0, and became the first Filipina in history to lift a WTA title. That alone would be the story of most players' careers. For Eala, it was just the beginning of the 2 hardest weeks of her life. She did not go home. She did not take a breath. She got on a plane to Toronto and kept playing, singles and doubles, 8 matches inside 14 days. Her doubles partner in Toronto, by the way, was Venus Williams, which tells you exactly how fast her entire world had shifted. And every single one of those matches was played in front of a sold-out crowd that had come specifically only entirely for her. Think about what that actually means. Most athletes get to be exhausted somewhere private. She was exhausted in front of thousands of people who had waited their whole lives to see someone like her walk onto a tennis court. If that idea means anything to you, if you have ever had the best thing that ever happened to you arrive at the exact same moment as the most draining thing that ever happened to you, keep watching, because the next part is where it all comes to a head. On the other side of the net, in Toronto's 3rd round, stood an American named Caty McNally, ranked 73 in the world. On paper, that looks routine for the higher-ranked player. Throw the paper away. 2 rounds earlier, McNally had gone down a set and been nearly finished against Linda Noskova, the reigning Wimbledon champion, and somehow fought her way back to knock her out of the tournament. The woman waiting for Eala on center court was not a name to dismiss. She was a player riding the best form of her life, with nothing to lose. And the kind of match those two were about to play has a name in tennis. It's called a war of attrition. There is no single blow that ends the argument. No forehand that settles the debate. Instead, the same brutal question gets asked over and over more than 100 times in a row, and you have to answer it correctly every single time. You do not lose that kind of match because you forgot the answer. You lose it because you run out of the strength to keep giving it. That is the state Eala walked into center court in. Emotionally full to the point of overflowing. Physically running on fumes. Facing an opponent who had already proven twice that week that she does not respect a scoreboard. And then, in the second set, something happened that almost nobody analyzed correctly. Every recap said the same thing. Second set, Eala up 3-2, medical timeout, ankle gets taped, play resumes. Clean, simple, done. But go back and actually watch the first set again, because there is something in it that almost nobody caught. Eala was already protecting something before any trainer was ever called. A small hesitation on a wide ball. A push-off that did not fully commit. She was managing an issue that the broadcast never mentioned and the recaps never noticed. Here is what everyone did catch. Serving to hold a lead in the second set, Eala went to save a point and her ankle rolled underneath her. And here is the part that says everything about who she is. She did not stop. She did not call for the trainer right away. She finished that entire game on an ankle that had just given out under her own body weight, won it, and only then sat down and let someone tape her up. That is not an accident. That is a decision. And it is, in my opinion, one of the most revealing moments of the entire match. Now here is where the story gets strange, because different outlets covering that exact same night reported the injury differently. Some said left ankle. Some said right ankle. One report described it as a right foot issue. It happened fast, the treatment happened fast, and Eala kept moving well enough afterward that even reporters sitting in the same press room could not agree on exactly what they had watched. If you think about it, that confusion is its own kind of statement about how quietly she handled real pain in front of thousands of people. But whichever ankle it was, the tape changed the match. Eala was still striking the ball cleanly, still constructing points the way she always does, but she was protecting a corner of the court now. And against a player like Caty McNally, that is dangerous because McNally is not the kind of player who tries to end the point with one big shot. She is a builder. She changes pace. She changes shape. She moves you side to side until your body finally says no. Eala had reached 5-4 in that second set, serving for a straight sets win. She could not close it. McNally won 3 games in a row to take the second set 7-5, and now the match was headed to a decider in front of a crowd that had gone from euphoric to something far quieter in the space of about 15 minutes. Here is a number that stopped me cold when I found it. Across 2 hours and 39 minutes, and across 184 total points, the final margin between these two players was 4 points. 94 points won for Eala, 90 for McNally. 2 players producing almost identical quality across nearly 3 hours of tennis, and the entire outcome came down to 4 points. So here is the real question, the one that made me stop and rewatch this whole match. If the tennis itself came out that close to even what actually decided it, it was not the ankle. If anything, the ankle should have decided this match the other way, because it is the reason Eala lost a set she was serving to close out. It was not fitness. Eala was the one running on 8 matches in 14 days. McNally was fresher. It was not ranking or experience. A 50-spot gap in the rankings never showed up anywhere on that stat sheet. Something else got Alex Eala through that third set, and I want you to hold on to that question because the answer is not what you think and it is not sitting anywhere in the box score. Eala opened the third set 2-0 and never gave the lead back. McNally fought to close the gap late, but Eala held firm and closed out the match. Now here is the moment that matters more than any statistic in this entire story. In her press conference, roughly 40 minutes after the last point was played, Eala was asked what happened at the net. And she repeated it word for word, in front of a room full of reporters. She said Caty McNally told her congratulations. And then McNally said this, "Thanks for letting me be a part of this." Sit with that sentence for a second because it does not work the way a normal handshake line works. You do not thank someone for letting you be part of a scheduled tennis match. McNally earned her way onto that court. She beat a Wimbledon champion to get there. Nobody let her in. So what was McNally actually thanking Eala for? It was not the match. It was everything around the match. The tickets for Eala's matches in Toronto sold out in under 30 minutes the moment the schedule was posted. The stands were filled with Filipino flags. The tournament restructured its entire schedule, moving every one of Eala's matches onto the biggest court in the building, because the alternative was putting a global wave of support into a space that could never hold it. The tournament director himself said he had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this kind of effect, and that every other tournament director in the sport was talking about it. Caty McNally stood in the middle of all of that for 2 hours and 39 minutes. And somewhere in there, She understood something that most of the tennis world still has not fully processed. She was not just losing to a great tennis player that night. She had walked into somebody else's history-making moment, and on some level she knew she was a guest in it. That is the sentence Eala carried off the court and into that press conference. And here is what she said about her own reaction in her own words. She said the match had been really challenging. She said the entire 2 weeks had been challenging, that every single match had thrown a completely different problem at her. And then she said something that I think explains that silent moment on the bench better than anything else could. She said she was really feeling the effects of just everything. Not the match. Everything. She said she had been feeling emotions so extremely over these past 2 weeks because of the circumstances, and she called that a great thing, but also something she had to find balance with. She said she thinks she is a sentimental person. And then she said, "I'm really proud of how I handled today. Proud of how she handled it. Not proud of how she played." For 14 days, this 21-year-old had been carrying something enormous and deliberately refusing to feel it, because feeling it in the middle of a tournament would have cost her the very next match. She made history in Washington and got on a plane within days. She walked into stadiums built out of her own country's hope, and had to go serve at deuce anyway. She kept the lid on match after match after match because that is the job. And then an opponent she had just beaten put her arms around her and said out loud the exact thing Eala had spent 2 weeks refusing to say to herself, that this was bigger than a tennis match. She did not go quiet because she won. She went quiet because somebody else finally named it, and once it was named, she could not unhear it. Now that is a beautiful story, and I want to be honest with you. Beautiful stories are easy to tell and hard to prove. So is any of this actually true, or is it just a nice thing to say over slow-motion footage? Toronto handed us real evidence, and it comes from 3 completely different directions, so let's go through all 3, because I think this is the part almost nobody has put together yet. First, the money, because money does not have feelings. Tennis Canada's own tournament director said publicly that he had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this kind of effect on ticket sales, and that every tournament director across the tour was talking about it. Roughly 3,000 tickets moved within about 30 minutes of Eala's schedule being announced. Her doubles match with Venus Williams sold out too, and the tournament rebuilt its schedule around her, moving her matches onto center court, something that normally goes strictly by seeding. The business reacted before the rankings ever caught up. Second, the crowd itself. Toronto is home to one of the largest Filipino communities anywhere outside the Philippines, and that community filled the stadium and turned it into something the WTA Tour has genuinely not had to deal with before. They cheered constantly, between points and sometimes during them, and the chair umpire had to ask for quiet more than once. Some of the tennis world called that a break in etiquette. But think about who was actually inside that noise.